Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. Today on this video, I wanted to talk about a category of soft plastic baits that originated in Japan, like a lot of new techniques do, and was one that I kind of scoffed at when I first saw it. The first win that I saw, I think, was the Leech Lake event. But it actually may have been the Seminole event that one of the Japanese anglers, I forget which Japanese angler it was, but I should know that. But he ended up winning the Seminole event, or at least did well. Shit. Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. Today on this video, we need to talk about these fuzzy baits that we've got on the market right now that everybody and their mother seems to be coming out with. Z-Man came out with 3 different designs. You got the fuzzy bugs. You've got this one's kind of the kind of a take on the original bait that came out and that got really popular over the last few years from Japan. This one's the fuzzy nuggets, and then you've got the fuzzy TRD, a play on the most popular Ned rig design out there. So the fuzzy baits have been coming out of the woodwork for sure. At ICAST, that was probably the most copied bait design out there. Now, Z-Man, I think, has hit the nail on the head with the 3 different options that they gave everybody. And the best thing is that it's made of ElaZtech. So way more durable. I was throwing a different brand fuzzy bait, similar to the fuzzy nuggets, at Leech Lake a little bit, and I lost a bunch of them, and I only had 1 pack, so that was kind of stressing me out. With the ElaZtech, they're going to last a lot longer. They're also softer, which gives them a little bit more action, which, take it for what it's worth. I mean, I think that these are so short and stocky that the softness isn't really going to add much to the action, but the buoyancy factor really does. For a lot of these techniques that you're going to be using, which we're going to get into the ways that I like to rig each of these. Most of the time, buoyancy is going to be a major, it's going to help you catch more fish on these fuzzy baits. It's going to add that sort of, floating, and undulating action that you're looking for on things like drop shots and Neko rigs and stuff like that. But anyways, we'll get into that in a minute. But this is a category of bait that I was really late to the game with. I'm actually a pretty late adopter to a lot of new things. I really like to stick with what works, what has worked for me, and to a certain extent, that's been good for me in my career. But recently, I've been feeling the pressure a lot because there's some new things like jig head minnows and the fuzzy dice, the fuzzy baits that really have transformed fishing in a way that I'm behind the 8 ball. So I started learning about this style of bait, and really the first time I put it into competition was at Leech Lake this year, and I was blown away by how much more effective one of these baits, which the one I was using was essentially this setup right here. It was the fuzzy dice style bait, which the fuzzy nuggets, I didn't have any of the fuzzy nuggets at the time, but this fuzzy dice style bait on a drop shot was what I was using for those smallmouth, or it was actually my follow-up bait. My primary bait was a reaction bait. But anyways, it ended up catching fish when all other drop shot baits would not catch them. And over the time that I've been kind of like figuring out why these baits actually work, at first I thought it was just kind of a gimmick. But then I started thinking about how we as bass anglers have been so conditioned to matching the hatch over the years that maybe we're kind of blinded by opportunities that otherwise we may have noticed before. And I think that one thing we tend to forget about bass is that they are super opportunistic. Bass, whether it's a smallmouth, largemouth, spotted bass, they'll eat just about anything, especially a largemouth. A largemouth, anything that'll fit in that big gaping hole that they call a mouth, you know, they'll eat it. You know, they'll gobble it down. Even if they've never seen it before, if it's the first time they've ever seen a mouse on the surface, they'll still gobble that thing down. They're not afraid of eating anything that moves. And I think that that's something that we definitely would do well to remember, is that it's not all about matching a you know, a bait to the most predominant forage species in a lake. Sometimes it's really good to do something outside of the box that looks like something that could be a meal, but maybe doesn't look like anything that we're used to seeing in a lake. You know, trout fishing, for instance, it's way more specific to what the current hatch is. You know, when you go fly fishing for trout, they're so super particular about the exact type of fly that's emerging at that moment that they won't eat anything else. You know, so with trout, it's completely different. For bass, man, they'll eat just about anything. And I think that's the principle here, is that we're doing something completely different with these style of baits that hasn't been done before, that just gives them something completely different to look at. And because of their opportunistic nature in feeding, you know, they gobble it up. And so a lot of guys have had so much more success just by throwing these frankly, you know, very unassuming and just kind of out of left field style baits, and they've been doing that because, in my opinion, because they're doing something completely different. So on that note, though, we may not be too far off from what bass normally see, you know, in their environment with these baits. You know, it doesn't look like anything that I've seen in any of the lakes that I fish. However, I had an interesting conversation with somebody who talked to a biologist on this topic, and the biologist said that, well, it works. These style baits work because they remind the fish of the zooplankton that they used to eat when they were just little fry, just the floating organisms, the tiny little microscopic or very tiny organisms that are in each fishery. You know, some of them look very similar to this. You know, a lot of the you know, larval stages of various you know, types of animals look similar to this. So whether or not it is actually something that the fish have grown up to know, maybe even when they're just this small, they kind of are imprinted with that desire to eat something like this because they've seen it before, or it's just something completely different that could be something that they'd eat. I don't know exactly what it is, but these fuzzy baits 100% work. And I've seen, you know, a better success with these rigged in certain ways than I have with other baits that are more traditional. But anyways, let's talk about some of the ways that I like to rig these fuzzy baits. So the first one is really the first way that I started rigging, you know, the fuzzy dice style baits, like the fuzzy nuggets. Okay, and I've already shown it to you, and that's the drop shot rig. A drop shot rig, you know, what I've got here is I've got the fuzzy nuggets, a green pumpkin one. See if we can focus on that. And I've got a Hayabusa DSR 132 hook. All these products are going to be, you know, have links in the description below so you can check them out. But that is the setup that I caught them at Leech. You know, that was my follow-up presentation. You know, if I saw a fish on the rock that didn't commit to my reaction bait, I would cast back, and I caught 2 fish on the drop shot that I weighed in, which, you know, was saying something. But the drop shot is really where I've found the most success, and really what I've seen is this is just a bait that you really don't do much to. You don't add a lot of action. You can add a little bit of kind of that palsy shake to it, you know, just that slight shaking action to it. That seemed to work the best overall. And from my experience outside of that tournament, since, you know, experimenting with these fuzzy dice style baits, Yeah, for sure. Just a real subtle, slow drag, maybe a little bit of shaking if you get to a particular object or you have interest from a fish. You can see them on live scope or something like that. So the drop shot seems to be a really good way to rig the fuzzy nuggets. I also like to rig the fuzzy bugs the same way. I'll actually hook it through the middle, so it would be like a wacky rig style of hooking the drop shot on there. So I'll just hook it here. I'll just do it just to show you exactly what I'm doing. In fact, I'm going to go out fishing today in the pond here with these. And the great thing about these versus all the other types of fuzzy baits on the market is these, you know, these ElaZtech ones, man, they're going to last a lot longer. You're not going to go through near as many of them. But we're going to take the same DSR 132, okay, and hook it right through the middle of it. So it's essentially going to be hanging just like this, okay? And this, to me, the fuzzy bugs actually looks like a small crayfish. So, like, to me, I think that this is probably one of the most, you know, compatible with the style of, or the, you know, the types of forage species that you see in the lake. So that, to me, looks like something real. I mean, it looks like an ant, you know, but plausibly, it looks like something that you find in the natural environment already. So this is a really good one. The fuzzy bugs and the fuzzy nuggets are the two that I really like out of the three of them for fishing on a wacky rig. The fuzzy nuggets I'll hook just about anywhere because it's, you know, it's symmetrical all around. And the fuzzy bugs I'll hook right through the middle. You can hook it right through the nose, but I feel like right through the middle is the sweet spot for the drop shot. So those are the two ways, or the two baits that I like to fish with a drop shot rig. But let's talk about another way to rig these baits, and that is a Ned rig. So the Ned rig, obviously everybody loves a Ned rig because it catches a lot of fish. The Ned rig for the fuzzy bugs and the fuzzy TRD is a great presentation for fishing these. You know, if like today we've got this lake that's full of you know, native smallmouth. They got some largemouth in here. You know, this is going to be a great opportunity for me to go ahead and catch a bunch of fish on a Ned rig. So we're going to rig this real quick. That right there, man, I mean, I don't know what it looks like, but it looks like something to me. Especially if you have small crayfish that are emerging. Like, this is a perfect little presentation for fishing around rocks and things of that sort. You know, it's almost like fishing a tiny little jig, really. So Ned rig is a really good way to rig both the bugs and the fuzzy TRD. So, you know, more of a bottom bouncing presentation. I really think that this is going to be a great way for you to kind of mix things up. If you've traditionally caught them on just a traditional TRD, or maybe the TRD fatties or something like that, some other traditional streamline, you know, Ned rig bait, you know, switching to one of these that have the skirt material on there, I think could be a game changer for you. Something that gives them something just a little bit different. So the Ned rig is going to be a great option for the two of these. And then you have a Neko rig. So I'll use the fuzzy bugs again, but this is actually a good way to rig the fuzzy bugs and the fuzzy TRD again. Is you take that same hook, that the DSR 132 that we use for the drop shot, and then you take a Neko rig weight. You could use a nail style weight. I personally like the Neko shrooms. Okay, this one right here. All right, and insert that. I would insert it into this flat side. That's one of the things I like about the TRD bugs, is they really put a lot of thought into this design for Neko rigging, also like weighted wacky rigging. and also, you know, fishing a drop shot, is you've got this little flat spot in the middle that can hold a wacky rig O-ring or you know, collar, and then you've got this flat spot on the end that facilitates a Neko rig weight really well. So we're going to insert that in here. Once I get it put in there nice and perfect, I might put a little bit of super glue on there just to keep it there. But that's it right there. And then you'd hook that DSR 132 right through the middle again. And you know, that is another great way to rig this bait. So let's take a, now we'll just use the drop shot just for the purpose of this video. Take off the fuzzy nuggets. So the fuzzy nuggets is a little bit less versatile as far as the techniques you're going to use it on, but I don't think that that's necessarily a bad thing. So just assume I put a collar on here, you know, some type of like VMC collar or something like that. So I'd hook it like that. I might hook it through that collar, but you can also just hook it straight to the bait because it's ElaZtech. It'll stay on there pretty darn good. But to limit, you know, a fish from being able to throw it, you're not going to break it. You know, the material is not going to break, but you might throw it easier if you don't have a collar there. But that's how I'd rig it right there, you know, minus the drop shot weight. So just you forget that dropper's there. But that's another great way to rig this bait. So, and that'll work great for the fuzzy TRD too. You know, so in general, those are the ways that I'm going to be rigging some of these. The dice pretty much, or the fuzzy nuggets, pretty much going to be a drop shot type deal. But on that note, there's also another hook that I think really opens up opportunities with the fuzzy nuggets specifically, and that is the Weedless wacky. You know, it's got a weighted hook here from Core Tackle. So you've got this, and this fuzzy nuggets has a very, it's made of ElaZtech, but it's a very firm formula ElaZtech, and that little you know, keeper, that spring keeper, usually is very tough to screw into ElaZtech, but you can do it a lot better with the nuggets. And overall, I think it's a great way to present this too. So another way to present the fuzzy nuggets is this Weedless wacky from Core Tackle. I think that's another really great way, especially if the fish are oriented more towards the bottom and you still want to use that fuzzy nuggets or dice you know, shape. I think this is a great way. Again, not super easy to use with that screw lock, but you know, you put enough pressure on it, it's gonna get on there a lot easier than other types of ElaZtech baits. So see, look at that. I've buried that thing and I didn't even try all that hard. So, and that thing's not going anywhere. Like, you could catch 100 and something fish on that bait. The only thing you got to worry about is breaking off, you know, so just use, you know, keep retying. But that thing is not going anywhere with that Weedless wacky hook from Core Tackle. And you can use a heavier weight. But anyways, just a thought on another way to rig the fuzzy nuggets. But these fuzzy baits for sure are not a gimmick. They're catching fish right now. And I think if you use them in the same type of situations you would use a Neko rig, a Ned rig, or a drop shot, or like a weighted wacky rig like this, you're going to catch fish that otherwise you wouldn't catch because they're so conditioned to some other techniques. So anyways, we'll do some more videos on the fuzzy type of baits, and yeah, we'll do some on the water stuff too, but I just wanted to do kind of a rigging overview. But thank you guys so much for watching. If you have any questions or comments, drop a comment below. We got all the links to all the products we talked about in this video in the description below. And other than that, I'm going to see you out on the water. Trust the process.